Lieutenant Mara Vance stepped off the small diplomatic frigate with quiet, careful steps, as if she wanted her boots to make no sound at all on the metal floor of Station Halcyon 5. Around her, people moved with the loud energy that always filled the docking ring engineers shouting orders. Aliens carrying heavy crates, and security teams checking arriving passengers with fast eyes and impatient gestures. But Mara walked as if she did not belong to the noise. Her hands stayed close to her sides, and her gaze stayed low, soft, and almost shy. Anyone watching her for the first time would think she was nervous or overwhelmed, and many of them did. A pair of Rellan dockworkers, tall reptilian beings with bright yellow scales, whispered to each other as she passed. One tilted his long snout toward her and said in a low voice, "That human looks like she wants to hide under a crate." The other let out a soft hissing laugh. Humans usually march in like they own the stars. But this one? She looks like she might faint. Mara heard none of this. Or perhaps she did. She noticed far more than people assumed, but she gave no sign. She lifted her eyes only to check her surroundings. Tracing the curves of the landing bay, the corners where shadows collected, overhead beams where a small drone might hide. She took in the sounds to the hum of the gravity stabilizers, the distinct clicking of the bay door's ceiling, the chatter of alien languages mixing in the air like thick smoke. She absorbed everything quietly, like someone gathering pieces of a puzzle that only she knew how to solve. Her commanding officer, Captain Rhodes, walked ahead of her, waving cheerfully to the station guards. He was the sort of man who spoke before he thought, laughed before he understood the joke, and shook hands with anyone who held theirs out. When he realized Mara had fallen behind by a few steps, he turned around and called, "Vance, come on, no need to be tense. This is a friendly station." Mara nodded once and quickened her pace. "Yes, sir." Her voice was calm and soft, without any edge or strength in it. Rhodes smiled in a way that said he found her harmless. Many people reacted to Mara like that. Humans and aliens alike saw her gentle movements, her quiet way of standing, and her polite tone, assumed she had no sharpness at all. They assumed she was delicate, easily frightened, and maybe even unsuitable for military work. But Mara did not correct them. She never corrected anyone. The human delegation was taken through a wide corridor filled with bright blue lights along the floor that guided them toward the reception chamber. Halcyon 5 was one of the most diverse stations in the region, a place where dozens of species lived, traded, negotiated, and even argued daily. It was a hub for peace talks and conflict prevention. For humans, it was an important symbol of interspecies cooperation. That was why Mara and Captain Rhodes had come. To join discussions about new security protocols, security seemed like a simple enough topic. But for the last 3 weeks, Halcyon 5 had been experiencing strange problems, mysterious power outages, encrypted messages appearing in restricted networks, and small pieces of equipment going missing. The station leaders insisted it was nothing serious, but the humans were not so sure. The delegation reached the reception area, a tall open space with clear panels that stretched from floor to ceiling, showing the stars outside like a living painting. Aliens of all shapes and sizes moved through the room, wearing clothing in every color. Some wore armor, some wore flowing robes, and some wore no clothing at all. A tall, blue-skinned Kylari official greeted Captain Rhodes warmly. "Welcome back to Halcyon 5. We are happy to have the human delegation here again." Rhodes grinned and shook her hand. "We're glad to be here. Beautiful station, as always." The Kylari woman nodded, then looked at Mara, who stood slightly behind the group, almost hidden by the taller humans. "And who is this?" "This is Lieutenant Vance," Rhodes said. "She's here to assist with the security review." Brilliant mind, just a bit quiet. Mara bowed her head politely. The Kylari official tilted her head, studying her for a moment. "You do not speak much." "No," Mara said simply. "You are shy?" "No," Mara clarified. "I am observing." The official smiled politely, but the expression held a trace of confusion. Few people understood Mara's way of thinking. They did not realize that her silent moments were not empty, they were full. Every detail mattered to her. Every pattern meant something. While others talked, she noticed the delegation moved on, heading toward their temporary living quarters. Mara followed without complaint, walking lightly. Like a shadow, as they passed one of the large windows overlooking the station's inner ring, she paused for half a second. Something about the maintenance drones below caught her attention. They were moving in an unusual pattern, not the smooth, predictable path of standard maintenance programming, but something more scattered, more chaotic, almost like they were searching for something. Before she could look longer, Rhodes called, "Vance, you drifting off again?" Mara gave the drones one last glance. "Apologies, sir." She caught up, but a question stayed in her mind. Why were the drones behaving that way? And why did she see faint scorch marks along the maintenance tunnel? Walls marked so small, most would miss them. When they finally reached their quarters, Captain Rhodes clapped his hands together. "All right, everyone.
Ellen.
We have our first briefing in 2 hours. Should be straightforward, maybe even boring." The others laughed. Mara did not, while the rest of the group unpacked, chatted, and tried the station's refreshments. Mara sat on her bunk and quietly organized her things. She placed her datapad on the small table, arranged her uniform pieces neatly, and slipped her small toolkit into the drawer. Everything had its place. Everything needed to be ready. She checked her wrist console, reviewing the station map for the 10th time. She zoomed in on the maintenance ring again, studying the paths the drones had taken earlier. Someone knocked lightly on her doorframe. It was Ensign Tolan, one of the young officers who always seemed eager to make conversation with anyone. "Hey, Lieutenant. We're heading to the common room. Want to come?" Mara looked up at him. "No, thank you." Tolan leaned against the door and grinned. "You sure? Could be fun. They have a multi-species music display happening tonight. Weird instruments, weird sounds. You might like it." "I appreciate the offer," Mara said, "but I have things to review." He raised an eyebrow. "Review? For what?" The captain said the briefing will be simple. "It might not be simple," she replied. Tolan laughed lightly. "You always think something complicated is happening. Relax, Lieutenant. Not every station is hiding trouble." Mara did not answer right away. Instead, she asked, "Have you noticed the maintenance drones in the outer ring?" Tolan blinked. "No. Why?" "They are not moving normally," he shrugged. "Maybe someone updated the program without logging it?" He hesitated, then shrugged again. "I don't know. I'm not a drone expert, but I'm sure it's nothing." Mara nodded politely, but she did not believe it. She did not feel fear. She did not panic. She simply felt the weight of information that did not fit together. And when information did not fit, something was wrong. After Tolan left, Mara returned to her silent study. She traced her finger over the map. She zoomed in on the scorch marks she had captured in a brief photo. She replayed the walking pattern of the 2 Relin workers earlier, noticing they had passed the same corridor twice, as if checking who was around. She remembered the faint vibration she had felt under her boots while walking from the docking. Something too rhythmic to be random. Most people would ignore all of this. Most people would not even see it. But Mara had been trained differently before joining the diplomatic security team. She had graduated top of her class in several advanced tactical programs, not because she was loud or brave or eager to prove herself, but because she understood patterns better than anyone else. She could break down chaos and find structure. She could predict outcomes from tiny signals that others forgot within seconds, but she never spoke about her abilities. She had no desire for attention. To her, noticing was simply normal. Later, when the delegation gathered for the briefing, Mara took a seat in the corner, quietly listening while the station's head of security spoke. The security chief, a broad-shouldered cyborg named Brock, talked with confidence. He explained the recent glitches as minor technical problems, nothing that should concern the diplomats. Rhodes nodded along, fully trusting the explanation. But Mara watched Brock's eyes. She saw the way he blinked too slowly after mentioning the power outages. She saw the faint spark of tension in his jaw when he talked about the intercepted messages. He was lying not completely, but enough Something was happening on Halcyon 5, something he did not want to explain. Mara raised her hand partway through the briefing. Everyone turned to her with mild surprise, including Rhodes. "Yes, Lieutenant Vance." Rhodes asked. Mara spoke calmly, choosing each word carefully. "I request access to the station's maintenance drone logs for the last 48 hours. Brock frowned. "Why would you need that?" "I observed unusual drone movement," she said. "It may be connected to the recent disruptions." A few people exchanged amused glances. Someone in the back snickered softly. Brock crossed his arms. "Lieutenant, we have technicians handling drone operations. I assure you, there is nothing to worry about." Mara nodded. "Understood, but I still request access." "I'm afraid that will not be necessary," Brock said sharply. Rhodes placed a hand on Mara's shoulder. "Drop it, Vance. We're guests here. No need to overthink things." Mara said nothing. She lowered her hand. She nodded in a polite, quiet way that made others assume she was simply being obedient or shy. But inside her mind, a line had been crossed. When people refused information, it usually meant they were hiding something. And when they were hiding something on a station this large, with diplomatic guests and vulnerable civilians everywhere, the danger could grow fast. Mara stayed silent for the rest of the briefing. She kept her eyes on the table, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She appeared calm and timid, just as everyone already believed she was. But beneath that calmness, her thoughts were racing, gathering details, arranging them, forming a picture piece by piece. And by the time the meeting ended, Mara Vance knew one thing with perfect certainty. Halcyon 5 was not safe, and soon. Everyone else would learn what she already suspected. They would learn that the quiet human they ignored was not timid at all, and when the danger finally revealed itself, her true abilities would no longer stay hidden. The next morning on Halcyon 5 began with the same busy hum that always filled the station. But Mara Vance woke with a tightness in her chest that she could not ignore. Something was wrong here. She could feel it as clearly as if the air itself was holding its breath. Though nothing dangerous had happened during the night, the sense of hidden movement, of quiet preparation in dark corners, stayed with her like a shadow that refused to leave. She rose early, dressed carefully, and checked her wrist console again. She had barely slept, spending most of the night reviewing the small details she had noticed since arriving. Every strange thing was stored neatly in her mind, like files waiting to be connected. Today she planned to gather more information quietly, without raising suspicion. When she stepped out of her room, the hallway outside buzzed with morning activity. Human officers chatted casually as they prepared for another day of meetings. A pair of alien merchants floated by on their hover platform, arguing loudly in their musical language. And security drones glided smoothly along the ceiling, scanning for unauthorized items. Everything looked normal. But appearances often lied. Captain Rhodes spotted Mara the moment she entered the common area. He waved at her with that same big grin he always had. "Morning, Vance. Sleep well?" She shook her head lightly. "I slept enough, sir," Rhodes laughed. "That means no. You worry too much. We're here for diplomatic work, not danger. Try to enjoy the station, will you?" Mara only nodded. She had already learned to avoid debating him. The delegation headed to the main council hall for their scheduled discussions. The hall was enormous, with curved walls that glowed a soft gold and seats shaped to fit dozens of species. Mara remained at the edge of the room, taking in everything. Captain Rhodes and the other senior officers took their places at the negotiation table. But Mara's focus drifted to the security personnel lining the walls. Every guard should have been attentive, scanning the room for threats. Most were. But two guards at the far end kept exchanging brief signals with their fingers small. Sharp gestures that did not match any standard communication. Mara recognized the pattern instantly. It was coded. She had seen something similar during training for counter-infiltration missions. Her pulse quickened. She stepped slightly closer, trying not to draw attention. The guard's armor bore Halcyon 5 colors, but their behavior did not match standard station protocol. They shifted their weight too often. Their eyes darted in unnatural patterns, and one of them repeatedly tapped his wrist panel, as if waiting for an update from someone outside the room. Mara watched quietly for nearly 20 minutes. She noticed everything: their posture, their timing, the strange way they avoided speaking to other guards. She stored each detail carefully. At last, a small vibration ran through the floor. It was very faint, barely noticeable. Mara tensed immediately. She knew the difference between station systems humming normally and something else moving through the mechanical layers. That vibration was too rhythmic, too heavy. Something was drilling, something was coming, but she stayed silent, unable to report it without evidence. The council meeting continued, filled with long speeches and political arguments. Mara listened without listening. Her mind stayed on the vibration. And after 15 more minutes, it happened again, slightly stronger. Someone was definitely drilling into a part of the station as the meeting carried on. A group of nervous station technicians shuffled into one of the side corridors. Mara noticed how they walked quickly while trying not to look rushed. She decided to follow them quietly, unnoticed. She slipped out of the hall and walked at a calm, steady pace until she reached the corridor they had taken. The technicians spoke in low voices as they rounded a corner. Mara stayed far enough behind that they would not sense her, but close enough to hear fragments of their conversation. Shouldn't be happening. Third time this week. Power grid spikes again, and we're finished. Commander said not to report it. That last sentence struck Mara. Hard as someone higher up was hiding something, the technicians turned into a locked maintenance room. Mara waited until the door sealed behind them, then stepped closer. She did not need to enter. She only needed to listen. Even through the door, their voices carried faintly. Syndicate's going to hit us any day. We need more time. If the council finds out, the sound suddenly cut off. Someone inside must have activated a sound-dampening barrier. Mara stepped back immediately. She had heard enough to know that her fears were real. The Gravik Syndicate, a dangerous criminal faction known for high-precision raids and brutal takeovers. If they were planning something here on Halcyon 5, it would not be small. And the strange drone behavior, the intercepted messages, the lies and the briefing, all of it, pointed to one truth. The station was being prepared for an attack. She returned to the main council hall. Moving quickly, but still quietly. She tried to find Captain Rhodes, but the meeting was still in progress. She could not interrupt, not without proof, and not without causing panic. So she took her usual place against the wall and watched again. Not long after, the two suspicious guards left the hall together. Their movements were too synchronized, too rehearsed. Mara slipped out behind them, maintaining distance. Following armed security without permission was risky, but doing nothing was worse. The guards took a service elevator down toward the lower decks of the station. Mara waited until the elevator returned, then took it down one level. When the door slid open, she found herself in a dim hallway filled with pipes, wiring panels, the faint smell of overheating circuits. She could hear the guards' voices echoing from further ahead. Almost ready. They're blind to this sector. Commander Brock says the humans won't know anything until it's too late. Mara's breath caught. The station's head of security was involved. Suddenly, footsteps sounded behind her. Mara spun quickly, pressing her back against the wall. A cleaning drone rolled by, scanning the floor. She exhaled slowly. Her heart pounded, but her mind remained focused. She moved deeper into the corridor, careful not to make a sound. She found a corner and peered around it. The two guards stood before a large sealed hatch, typing a code into a hidden panel. The hatch opened with a heavy groan, revealing a room filled with crates marked with non-station symbols. Mara recognized one of the symbols, stylized cloth insignia of the Gravik Syndicate. Her suspicions were no longer suspicions. The attack was real, and the guards were preparing for it. She needed to leave and tell someone. But as she turned, she realized she was not alone. A soft whir came from above her. Mara looked up just in time to see a small surveillance drone locking onto her position. It beeped once, a warning signal. Someone was watching. She ducked behind a pipe just as the drone fired a stun pulse. The blast hit the wall, showering sparks. Mara rolled to the side, moved fast and low, and slipped behind a support column. Another pulse shot past her, missing by a few inches. Her heart raced, but her mind stayed calm. She tracked the drone's pattern. 3 seconds between pulses. It could not turn quickly. It always scanned left before right. She waited for the moment, then lunged out and grabbed a loose pipe from the floor. When the drone shifted left, she swung hard, knocking it out of the air. It crashed to the ground with a sharp crack. Mara ran. She sprinted back toward the central decks, making sure not to take the same path she came from. She reached a crowded corridor and blended into the flow of people. Her breathing steadied. She scanned the crowd. No one seemed to be following her, but she knew the guards would notice the drone's failure soon. She had to warn someone she trusted. When she finally reached the human quarters, Captain Rhodes was eating a snack and laughing with another officer. Mara approached him quickly. "Sir," she said, her tone low but firm, "I have information." "We need to speak privately." Rhodes looked at her with mild annoyance. "Vance, we're off duty right now." "Can it wait?" "No, sir, it cannot." Her eyes held urgency, something he was not used to seeing from her. Rhodes's smile faded a little. "All right. What is it?" Mara hesitated. She could not speak in the common room. Too many ears. "Not here." Rhodes sighed and stood. They stepped into a nearby side room. "Okay, Lieutenant. What did you find?" Mara spoke quickly but clearly. She told him about the coded gestures between the guards, the drilling vibrations, the technician conversation, the crates marked with syndicate symbols, the drone that had attacked her. Rhodes stared at her as if she had told him the stars were falling. "Vance, that sounds unbelievable." "It is true, sir." He rubbed his forehead. "You're telling me the head of station security is working with the Gravik Syndicate? That they're planning an attack on Halcyon 5? "Yes." Rhodes shook his head. "If you're wrong, I am not wrong," she said softly. Her calm certainty startled him. He opened his mouth to argue again, but something in her expression stopped him. He had never seen her look so focused, so steady, so sure. Before he could speak again, alarms suddenly echoed through the station. Red lights flashed across every wall. A booming voice announced, "Security breach detected in the lower decks. All personnel, prepare for emergency protocols." Rhodes's face went pale. He looked at Mara with wide eyes. "How did you know?" He whispered. Mara didn't answer. She was already moving. She had no weapons, no armor, no authority. But she had her mind, and she knew the attack had only just begun. The moment the alarms rang through Halcyon 5, the station shifted from calm order to chaotic fear. People rushed into hallways. Loud voices filled the air, and the smooth, steady hum of daily life turned into a trembling storm of panic. Red emergency lights flashed across every wall, casting long, sharp shadows that made everything feel more dangerous. Mara Vance stood in the center of the corridor, completely still, listening to the rhythm of the alarm. It beat like a warning drum, steady, urgent, and impossible to ignore. Captain Rhodes looked at her with shock on his face. "Vance, we need to get back to the council chambers. They will want answers." "No," Mara said immediately. "The attack will start in the lower decks. That is where they have moved their equipment. We need to go there first." Rhodes hesitated. He trusted protocols more than instincts, but the alarm shook something inside him. "Fine. Lead the way." Mara nodded once and began moving quickly. She didn't run. She didn't waste any steps. She moved with purpose, her boots hitting the floor at the exact pace needed to stay fast and controlled. Rhodes followed her, struggling to keep up, as they traveled through the hallways. Civilians pressed against the walls, trying to get out of the way. Several aliens shouted in confusion, asking what was happening. Others ignored everything and ran for the escape lifts. Security drones buzzed overhead, scanning frantically. When they reached a wide cross corridor, a sudden impact shook the floor. The walls trembled. A heavy, booming echo rolled through the station like distant thunder. Rhodes grabbed a railing for balance. What was that? He asked. Mara already knew. Boarding pods? Boarding what? Rhodes looked horrified. The Gravik Syndicate is entering the station. Another boom shook the floor. Then another. The air vibrated with the force. She picked up speed, no longer holding back. Rhodes saw her move faster and faster. And for the first time he realized something strange. Mara was not exhausted, nor panicking. Her breath stayed calm. Her eyes stayed sharp. She was focused in a way he had never seen before. They rounded a corner and almost collided with a squad of station guards. At first, the guards aimed their weapons, but when they saw Rhodes's uniform, they lowered them. Captain Rhodes, one guard said breathlessly, we are moving to block the attackers near Section 14. Stay behind us. Mara stepped forward before Rhodes could speak. Do not go to Section 14, she said firmly. That is a trap. They want you there. What? The guards frowned. One of them narrowed his eyes. Who are you to give orders? A human officer with information, Mara replied calmly. You must go to the maintenance ring instead. The guard scoffed. We don't take orders from visiting delegates. Mara looked at him without blinking. If you go to Section 14, you will die. The attack will hit from the right junction. There will be a concussive blast from above. You will have no cover. The guard's face changed. How could you possibly know? A loud explosion erupted from the far end of the station. Screams echoed. A wave of heat rushed through the corridor. The guards froze. Section 14 had just been hit. Rhodes stared at Mara in disbelief, but she did not waste time. Move, she said, stepping around the stunned guards. We only have minutes before the attackers reach the central decks. The guards exchanged looks, fear rising in their eyes. But then one of them muttered, we follow her. She knows something we don't. They fell into step behind her. The deeper they moved into the lower levels, the more the station shook. Smoke drifted through the air. Lights flickered. And now, the faint sound of metallic steps echoed through the tunnel's heavy boots. Organized movement. Approaching from several directions, the Gravik Syndicate was inside. Mara slowed when they reached a narrow hallway. She lifted her hand, signaling for silence. Rhodes and the guards stopped immediately. Mara leaned slightly forward, listening. The station itself was talking to her through vibrations. They are close, she whispered. Then she pointed to the right passage. 3 attackers. Heavy armor. They will come this way. The guards tightened their grips on their weapons. Mara pointed to the left passage. 2 more. Light armor. Fast movement. Rhodes blinked. How do you know that? Footstep spacing. Weight difference. Air displacement. Breath patterns. Rhodes stared at her as if seeing her for the first time, before anyone could respond. Shadows appeared at the far end of both passages. The Syndicate raiders emerged in full armor-dark suits with glowing red visors. They moved like wolves, scanning with powerful rifles. Cover positions. Mara ordered quietly. The guards obeyed her instantly. Rhodes ducked behind a support beam. The attackers spotted movement and opened fire. Blue energy bolts tore through the air.
Ow, searing the walls.
The guards returned fire, but they were pinned down by the heavy. Barrage. Mara did not hide. She stepped out from behind the wall at the exact moment the attackers reloaded. She moved quickly, crossing the open space in 3 silent steps. Rhodes shouted her name, thinking she was running to her death, but she reached a nearby maintenance hatch and yanked it open. A burst of steam shot out, clouding the hallway. The raiders lost visibility. Now, Mara said. The guards pushed forward under the steam cover, firing accurately. 2 Syndicate attackers fell. The others tried to retreat to better ground, but they stepped directly into the path Mara had predicted. The guard squad took them down in seconds. Silence returned. Except for the crackle of sparking wires, Rhodes slowly rose from his hiding spot. Vance, you could have been killed. No, she said simply. I calculated the timing. One of the guards stared at her. Who are you? But Mara did not answer. She listened again, her eyes distant, searching for the next clue in the trembling metal beneath her feet. "We must move," she said. "This is only a scout team. The real strike will hit the outer ring in less than 5 minutes." "How do you know that?" Rhodes asked. "Because that is where the drones were gathering yesterday. They were mapping weak points. The Syndicate wants to disable gravity control first. If they do, the station will lose balance." The guards exchanged horrified glances. "If gravity control collapses," one guard whispered, "the whole station will spin out of alignment." "Exactly," Mara said. "We must go." They rushed through the maintenance tunnels. As they moved, the sound of battle grew louder behind them. More Syndicate forces were entering. Mara could hear their weapons, hear their boots, hear their radio clicks. But she kept moving. They reached a heavy blast door blocking the way to the outer ring. It was locked, red lights glowing across its frame. The door needed a high-level security code. Rhodes stepped forward. "I don't have clearance for this level." "I do not need a code," Mara said. She knelt beside the door panel, removed a small tool from her suit pocket, and opened the maintenance port. Her hands moved quickly, shifting wires, rerouting circuits, forcing the system to reset. She did not hesitate. Every movement was precise. Rhodes watched her with confusion and awe. "Vance, where did you learn all this?" "Training," she replied softly. "An observation." Within seconds, the door hissed open. They entered the outer ring. Smoke filled the air. The gravity control chambers were ahead, 3 large cylindrical units glowing with blue energy. The vibrations were stronger here, shaking the floor under their boots. Mara stopped suddenly. Its squad of Syndicate elites stood guarding the gravity control units. These raiders wore heavy armor, thick plating, reinforced energy shields. They were bigger, stronger, and far more dangerous. One of the guards whispered, "We can't take them. Not with just us." Mara stepped forward, her calm voice cutting through the fear. "We do not need to overpower them. We just need to stop them." "How?" Rhodes asked. Mara scanned the room. Every pipe, every vent, every panel, every shadow. Then she saw it. A maintenance crane hung above the gravity chamber, holding a stack of metal crates. The locking system was old. The bolts were weak. Mara pointed upward. "If those crates drop, they will block the Syndicate from reaching the control consoles." The guard shook his head. "We don't have time to climb up there. We do not need to climb." Mara raised her tool again and ran toward the side control post. She moved boldly into the open. A Syndicate raider saw her and fired. Rhodes shouted her name. But the shot missed. Mara had already thrown herself into a slide, skidding behind the control post. She reached the override panel and tore it open. Energy bolts hit the metal beside her, sparking violently. She ignored them and cut the main lock cable. Above, the crane groaned. The crates dropped. The ground shook as they slammed between the raiders, and the gravity units forming a heavy metal barrier. The Syndicate elites cursed and began firing at the crates, trying to break through. Guards, Mara ordered, "Hold them back as long as possible." The guards formed a barrier line. Mara rushed to the gravity control console. The energy readings were unstable. Someone had already begun sabotaging the system. She moved fast, her fingers flying over controls. "I can stabilize it, but you must keep them away." Rhodes fired his weapon clumsily beside the guards. "We'll buy you time." The raiders advanced, pushing forward with brute force. Mara entered command strings, rerouted power, and locked down manual access. The floor shook. The chamber lights flickered. Finally, she hit the final sequence. Gravity. Control locked. The system stabilized. The Syndicate elites roared in anger behind the crates. One of them managed to climb halfway over. Mara turned, grabbed a loose pipe, and swung it upward with sharp precision. She hit the raider squarely in the visor, knocking him back down. The heavy armor crashed against the floor. Rhodes stared at her, stunned. "Vance, what kind of training did you have?" She breathed softly, eyes steady. "Enough." The raiders regrouped, but the air shifted around them. Loud whistles signaled incoming defense reinforcement, station soldiers rushing toward the chamber. For now, the attackers were blocked. But the battle for Halcyon 5 was only beginning, and everyone on the station had finally learned something important. The quiet human was not timid. She was something else entirely. Something dangerous. Something unstoppable. Smoke drifted through the outer ring as alarms continued to echo across Halcyon 5. The battle had not slowed. It had only changed shape, spreading deeper through the station like fire running through dry grass. Mara Vance stood beside the sealed gravity control units, breathing slowly to keep her mind clear. Her uniform was dusty and slightly burned from the blast nearby, but her eyes remained calm and sharp. She watched the chaos with focus, not fear. Captain Rhodes leaned against a wall, exhausted and shaken. He looked at Mara as if she were someone he had never truly met before. "Vance, you're not the same quiet officer we came here with." Mara did not answer. She scanned the room, listening for footsteps, weapon clicks, anything that would warn her of the next danger. Her silence said everything. She was still thinking, still calculating, still planning. More station guards arrived, taking positions behind the crates she had dropped earlier. They were sweating, shaking, and confused, but the moment they saw Mara, some of their fear faded.
Ow.
She had already saved their lives once. Many of them trusted her now, without question. One of the guards, a tall Averin with violet skin, hurried toward her. "Lieutenant Vance. Reinforcements are pushing the Syndicate forces back from the lower junctions, but we lost contact with command. We think the Syndicate infiltrated the upper levels." Mara nodded. "Yes, they will go there next. Their goal is not only to damage the station, they want the council leaders." Rhodes' eyes widened. "The diplomats?" "Yes," she said softly. "They want leverage, hostages." The guard cursed under his breath. "If they take the council, we're all dead. We'll force surrender." Mara straightened. "Then we must reach the council hall first." Rhodes frowned. "But we have guards up there, and the station security chief." "The chief is involved," Mara said calmly. "He will not protect them." Rhodes swallowed hard. "Right. Then lead us." Mara began moving immediately. She took a side corridor to avoid the main battlefield. The guards followed her without hesitation. They had seen enough to understand she was not guessing. Her instincts were not instincts, they were precise assessments, as they climbed a long emergency staircase. Distant explosions echoed from lower decks. The metal steps vibrated under their feet. "They are breaching a secondary access tunnel," Mara said quietly. "We do not have long." "How do you?" one guard started to ask. Mara cut him off gently. "Listen." They paused for a moment. Through the alarms, through the shouting far away, there was a faint grinding sound, metal against metal. "Syndicate plasma cutters." She heard it clearly. The guard stared at her in disbelief. "You can hear that from here?" "Yes. No one asked more questions." They reached the upper level and rushed down a wide corridor that curved toward the council wing. The smell of burnt wires filled the air. A small fire crackled near one wall, and a thick cable had snapped from the ceiling, sparking on the floor like a live serpent. Rhodes jumped back. Mara stepped forward and kicked the cable away calmly, then kept walking. When they reached the final turn before the council chamber, Mara raised her hand again. "Stop." Everyone froze. She slowly leaned forward and listened. Her eyes narrowed. "They are inside the council hall." Rhodes wiped sweat from his forehead. "How many?" 10, she said, without hesitation. "But only 6 have rifles. The others carry shock batons. They expect surrender." The guards behind her exchanged nervous looks. One whispered, "This is madness. You do not even see them." "How does she know all that?" Before anyone else could react, a loud bang shook the corridor. The council hall doors smashed open. Station officials ran out screaming. Some stumbled, some fell, and some scrambled over one another to escape. Behind them, a Gravik elite raider appeared, armored and massive. He grabbed a fleeing alien diplomat by the arm and threw him to the ground. The raider lifted a shock baton, ready to strike. Mara moved before anyone else could blink. She sprinted forward faster than the raider expected. With one precise step, she placed her heel against the edge of the wall, pushed upward, and swung her leg in a sharp arc. Her kick struck the raider's visor, cracking it. The syndicate soldier staggered back, confused. Mara landed lightly and stepped between the diplomat and the raider. The huge armored figure raised his baton again, angrier now. "Fall back," Mara ordered the diplomat. He scrambled away without looking back. The raider lunged. Mara sidestepped smoothly, grabbed the raider's wristplate and twisted hard. The angle was perfect. The baton slipped from his hand. She kicked it away, then ducked under the raider's swinging arm and struck the joint of his knee. The armor there was weaker. Her hit drove the raider down to one knee. Rhodes and the guards watched with wide eyes. Mara fought not with strength, but with precision. She targeted every joint, every weak point, every seam in the armor. Her movements were almost quiet, like she was dancing with the enemy. The raider roared and tried to rise. Mara leaped behind him, grabbed the back of his helmet, and slammed it sideways into the wall. The visor shattered completely. The raider collapsed, unconscious. The hallway fell silent. Rhodes whispered, "Mara, what are you?" She walked past the fallen raider and into the council hall. Inside, the room was filled with overturned tables, fallen banners, and terrified diplomats hiding behind furniture. The remaining syndicate raiders were shouting orders. "There," one yelled, pointing at Mara. "Neutralize her." Two raiders fired instantly. Mara dove behind a broken table. Energy bolts scorched the air above her. She peeked out for a split second, just enough to study the room's layout. Then she moved. She sprinted to the side wall, staying low. Shots followed her like angry lightning. One bolt grazed her shoulder, burning her uniform, but she kept going. She reached a metal support beam and slid behind it. The guards entered the hall behind her and began firing back. The room filled with blasts and echoes. But Mara had already noticed something important. The raiders were trying to reach the central platform where the council members were hiding. They wanted hostages. She could not allow it. Mara rushed forward. She jumped onto a fallen chair, used the momentum to spring onto the platform railing, and launched herself toward the nearest raider. He swung his gun toward her, but she twisted midair and landed behind him. Before he could turn, she struck the back of his neck with the edge of her hand. He collapsed instantly. Another raider roared and charged at her. He swung his rifle like a club. Mara ducked under it, rolled across the ground, and grabbed the weapon from his hands with a sharp twist. She flipped it backward, pressed the trigger, and fired at his legs. He fell, screaming. Rhodes and the guards were still fighting across the room. "Vance, behind you," Rhodes shouted. Mara spun, just in time to see a raider aiming at her from the balcony above. She dropped flat. The shot hit the wall behind her. She picked up a fallen combat knife, flicked her wrist, and threw it upward with perfect aim. The knife struck the raider's wrist, making him drop his rifle. It tumbled over the railing and hit the floor with a loud clang. The battle raged for several more minutes, every second tense and unpredictable. The guards held the hall entrance. Mara held the center. And slowly, the syndicate forces began to fall. Finally, only one raider remained their leader. He stood near the council podium, tall and heavily armored, with a brutal energy axe crackling in his hands. His helmet visor glowed bright red as he stared at Mara. "You," he growled. "You ruined the plan." Mara stepped closer. "Yes," he lifted the axe. "You are small. You should be afraid." "I do not get afraid," she said calmly. "I get focused." The leader roared and charged at her. Mara didn't move until the last moment. Then she stepped sideways, letting the axe cut air. She struck. The leader's elbow joint. The armor there cracked. The raider howled. He swung again. Mara ducked under the blade and kicked his ankle. The heavy armor buckled slightly. He swung a third time wildly. Mara grabbed the axe handle, shoved it upward, and used his momentum to flip herself behind him. She jumped, wrapped her arm around his neck, and pulled him backward with all her strength. The raider stumbled. His heavy armor made quick turning impossible. Mara used that weakness. She dropped to the floor and swept his legs. He fell hard. His axe slid across the floor. Mara grabbed it, The leader reached for her throat, but she slammed the axe handle against his helmet. The visor shattered. He went limp. Silence filled the hall. Rhodes stared at the scene, breathing hard. The guards stared. The diplomats stared. Mara stood slowly, dropping the axe. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then an alien council member whispered, "The quiet human. She defeated all of them." Another said, "She saved us." Rhodes stepped forward, voice soft and full of awe. "Mara, how long were you hiding all this?" Mara looked at him, calm as ever. "I was not hiding anything. You did not ask." Outside the hall, the sounds of battle continued, but a new tone echoed through the station. Hope, because word was already spreading from one deck to another. The timid human was not timid at all. She was a combat master, and she might be the reason Halcyon 5 still had a chance to survive. The council hall was filled with smoke and the sharp scent of burnt energy cells. Even after the last gravigrator fell, the air still felt tense, as if the walls themselves were trying to catch their breath. Mara stood in the center of the room, her uniform torn and dusty, her calm eyes watching the entrance for any sign that the fight was not truly over. The guards remained behind her, exhausted and shaky, yet unable to stop staring at the quiet human, who had single-handedly changed the direction of the battle. Rhodes placed a hand on her shoulder. "Mara, it's over. We've taken back the council hall." She shook her head faintly. "It is not over yet. The syndicate squads deeper in the station will not retreat easily. They may still have backup units." One of the diplomats who had been hiding behind the desks stepped forward slowly. His clothes were wrinkled and his face pale, but he looked at Mara with honest gratitude. "Lieutenant Vance, you saved our lives. You saved this entire council. We would have been taken hostage if not for you." Mara gave a small nod. She did not show pride or excitement. She simply accepted his words, then scanned the room for wounded officers. A guard sat in the corner, clutching his arm, bleeding from a deep cut. Mara moved to him immediately, taking out a portable med-gel unit from her belt. She knelt beside him with quiet focus. "Hold still," she said, applying the gel around the wound. "You will be all right." The guard stared at her with wide eyes. "You're calm after all that." "How?" "I learned to stay calm," she answered softly. "Training," Rhodes exhaled sharply. "Training is one thing, Mara. What you did today was something else entirely." Mara did not reply to that. She helped the guard to his feet and handed him off to a medic, who finally arrived once the shooting stopped. More medics rushed in, along with repair teams and local officers who had been trapped elsewhere. As they began clearing the hall, the diplomatic council moved toward Mara again. A tall, veteran elder with delicate silver markings on his skin bowed deeply before her. "Human combat mastery is impressive, but you, Lieutenant Vance, are exceptional. We owe you a great debt." Mara gave a gentle bow of her own. "Everyone here fought. I did not do this alone." Rhodes shook his head with a small smile. "You led us. Don't pretend otherwise." Stories of Mara's actions had already spread across Halcyon 5. Officers whispered her name as they passed by the hall. Civilians who were rescued from danger spoke of the quiet human who moved like lightning. Even those who had mocked her earlier in the week now looked at her with full respect. Some with awe, some with disbelief. The council members decided to move to a safer location deeper in the station. Mara insisted on escorting them herself. As she walked in front of the group with her rifle slung over her shoulder and her silent footsteps echoing across the floor, she sensed something deeper shifting within the station. People were no longer afraid of the syndicate. They had seen hope. And that hope came from someone they had once ignored. When they reached the secure chamber reserved for emergencies, the council chief approached Mara quietly. "Lieutenant Vance, we would like to request your assistance after this crisis is over." She looked at him with curiosity. "Assistance with what?" "A new defensive cooperation between our species," he said. "We want to form a joint task force to protect stations like Halcyon 5 from future threats. Your strategic instincts could guide this team." Mara blinked in surprise. You want me to help lead it? Yes, the chief said with a kind smile. Your calm strength is something this galaxy needs. Mara did not answer immediately. She thought about it for a quiet moment. A part of her felt unprepared. She had never been the center of attention. She had always worked silently, supporting others, avoiding the spotlight. But another part of her knew that her skills could protect many more lives. Her voice was soft. I will consider it. Thank you. The council's safe. Mara turned back toward the chaotic corridors. Rhodes jogged up beside her. Where now? We finished what we started, she replied. They moved through the upper decks, clearing rooms and helping trap civilians. Every time Mara entered a corridor, the officers and guards straightened their posture almost instinctively. She corrected their weapon grips, pointed out blind spots, and quietly improved their defensive positions. And every time she did, anything people watched with the respect she had never asked for, but had now undoubtedly earned. A pair of young recruits approached her nervously. One of them stuttered, Lieutenant. Can you show us how you disarmed that raider earlier? Mara gently shook her head. You do not need to fight like me. You only need to trust your training and keep calm. The recruits smiled, encouraged. They walked away, whispering excitedly. Hours passed as the station slowly regained control. The final pockets of syndicate resistance were cleared by coordinated teams. Many of those plans were based on Mara's quick tactical sketches, drawn on discarded metal sheets using a broken stylus. Her diagrams were simple, yet effective, allowing even inexperienced officers to follow them easily. Near the end of the operation, as the last explosion faded and the alarms finally fell silent, Rhodes approached her again. He looked exhausted, but his eyes carried the brightness of relief. Mara, we did it. She looked over the damaged but standing station. Panels were scorched, lights flickered, and the metallic air felt heavy with smoke. But the people were alive. The council was safe. The station still floated in place, not broken, not burning, but starting to heal. Yes, she said softly. We did. A sudden wave of applause echoed down the corridor. Mara turned to see a crowd of civilians and station workers gathered near one of the repair zones. They clapped and cheered as she passed, some calling out her name, others bowing lightly in gratitude. Mara felt her chest tighten. She was not used to applause. She was not used to attention of any kind. Her steps slowed, and she lowered her gaze slightly, almost wishing she could fade back into the background again. Rhodes stepped beside her with a grin. Get used to it. You deserve every bit of it. Mara didn't argue. She simply kept walking. Later, when the station lights stabilized and the fires were fully controlled, Mara stood on one of the observation balconies. Halcyon 5's large window wall stretched out before her, showing the stars outside, quiet, peaceful, and endless. Ships moved around the station like small fireflies, bringing supplies, rescuing survivors, and carrying messages of safety. Rhodes joined her again, holding 2 cups of warm Ralt tea. He handed her one. You've been standing here for a while. I was thinking, she said. About what? About how quickly things can change, Mara answered. One moment everyone thinks I am too quiet. The next moment, they expect me to lead soldiers across the galaxy. You didn't change, Mara. They just finally saw you for who you really are. She held the warm cup between her hands. Maybe a soft chime echoed behind them. The council chief approached again. Lieutenant Vance, we have discussed our proposal further. We would like to formally offer you a position as strategic advisor and field commander of the new interspecies defense initiative. Ach! Mara looked at him for a long moment. Will this help protect lives? Yes, he said. Many. She nodded once. Then I accept. The chief smiled warmly. We are honored. As he left, Rhodes clapped her gently on the back. Look at you. A whole galactic defense team built around your tactics. That's something. Mara breathed slowly. I only want to help. And you will, Rhodes said. You already have. The stars glimmered outside the window, casting a soft reflection on her face. Mara felt a sense of peace she had not felt in a long time. Not because the battle was over, but because she had found clarity about her place in the galaxy. She no longer needed to remain hidden or silent. She no longer needed to pretend to be timid. She could be quiet and still be strong. And she could use that strength to protect countless people. Across many worlds, a soft hum came from the comm panel beside the balcony. The station's central controller announced that all Syndicate forces had